The sun set behind the towering structures of the alien city, casting a pale orange glow over the bustling marketplace. Among the chaotic noise of merchants haggling and aliens shouting at each other, one event stood above all others: the slave auction. The air was thick with tension as hundreds of creatures from different parts of the galaxy gathered. Around the central platform, the aroma of alien spices mixed with the heavy stench of fear that hung over the crowd. Humans, captured from various planets, stood in chains, waiting to be sold. Each of them was bound and helpless, but their eyes told stories of defiance and pain. The humans had no control over their fate. They were just commodities, traded like the rarest of treasures. Yet not one had the choice to decline. Among the crowd stood a young man, his heart pounding loudly in his chest. His name was Alex, and his world had been turned upside down ever since his planet was raided by these alien invaders. He had been a soldier, fighting for the freedom of his people, but in the end, it all had been for nothing. His planet had fallen, and now he was here, a slave among others, with no chance of escape. He glanced around the auction grounds. The alien buyers were diverse, each more terrifying than the last. Massive reptilian creatures, winged beings with glowing eyes, and humanoids covered in shimmering silver armor. All were here for one thing: to buy slaves. The price for each human seemed to increase with each bid, the crowd growing more desperate, more excited. Alex tried to stand tall, despite the chains that bound him, his mind racing for a plan, any escape. The auctioneer, an insectoid creature with sharp mandibles and a booming voice, stepped forward. He raised a clawed hand, signaling the start of the auction. Next up, a human male, strong, healthy, and perfect for manual labor. The creature's voice echoed, sending a shiver down Alex's spine. He stepped forward, forced by the guards holding him by the arms. The chains rattled as he was pushed onto the stage, and for a brief moment, he locked eyes with the audience. The crowd of alien faces was a blur, but one pair of eyes stood out, a pair of deep, violet eyes that seemed to study him with an unsettling intensity. He couldn't look away from her. The woman was tall and regal, her posture commanding, her face hidden beneath a silver veil. The alien queen sat on her ornate throne, surrounded by her loyal attendants. Her beauty was otherworldly, ethereal, and yet her presence exuded power. Alex's breath caught in his throat. She was unlike any other alien in the crowd. There was something about her, something that drew him in. The auctioneer continued. "Who will start the bidding? A healthy, strong human, ready for work in your palace, or perhaps as a personal servant?" Alex tried to remain calm, his body tense, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. He wanted to scream, to lash out, but the chains kept him in check. He knew that even if he did manage to break free, there was nowhere to run. His future, if he even had one, depended on the decisions of those who watched him from the shadows. The bidding started slowly, with a few buyers offering modest amounts for him. But then, a voice rang out, smooth and commanding: 500,000 credits. The crowd fell silent. Everyone turned to look at the woman who had spoken. It was the queen. She sat back in her chair, her face still hidden, but her eyes burned with a cold intensity. The auctioneer's antennae twitched in excitement, and he turned to the crowd. 500,000 credits. Do I hear more?" he cried, his voice full of energy. But no one else dared to challenge the queen's offer. "Sold, to the lady in silver," the auctioneer exclaimed, his voice filled with awe. Alex felt his heart sink. He had been sold, but not to just anyone. He had been sold to her, the alien queen. He was now hers, bound by the chains of slavery, and his fate was sealed. The crowd parted as her guards stepped forward, unchaining him roughly and leading him to the queen. As they approached her, Alex's mind raced. Who was she? Why had she chosen him? The queen's reputation was infamous. Her name whispered in fear throughout the galaxy. She was known for her cruelty, her desire for control, and her ability to bend even the strongest to her will. Yet, there was something in her eyes that suggested she had an interest in him beyond mere possession. The queen's voice was soft, like the wind brushing through the trees, but it carried an unmistakable authority. "I see potential in you," she said, her tone calm but deliberate. "You will serve me well." Alex could only nod, though his thoughts were a whirlwind of confusion and fear. He had no idea what this alien queen wanted from him, but one thing was clear: his life was no longer his own. The chains that bound him were more than just physical. They were the beginning of a far deeper entrapment. As the queen's attendants led him away, Alex's gaze lingered on her. His heart raced, not just from fear, but from the nagging feeling that there was more to her than met the eye. Something had changed in the way she looked at him, something that made him wonder whether he was walking into a nightmare, or something much more dangerous. And so, the auction ended. But Alex's story had only just begun. What lay ahead, he couldn't say, but one thing was certain: he would never be the same again. The ship was colossal, a dark and intimidating behemoth floating silently in the vastness of space. It looked like something out of a nightmare, its jagged, black exterior glistening under the light of distant stars. Alex could hardly believe that just hours ago he had been standing on that auction platform, humiliated and powerless. Now, he was aboard the very ship of the alien queen who had bought him. The thought sent chills down his spine, but there was no time for fear. Not yet. He had to survive. He had to make sense of what was happening. He was led through the cold, metallic halls by two guards, their armor clanking as they marched with a rhythmic precision. The air was thick with the hum of technology, and the flickering lights overhead cast strange shadows on the walls. It was as if the ship itself had a pulse, a living entity that watched and waited. The guards finally stopped before a large, ornately decorated door. One of them knocked twice, and after a brief pause, the door slid open with a soft hiss. Inside was a room that took Alex by surprise, a stark contrast to the cold and impersonal corridors. The queen's quarters were lavish, the walls adorned with intricate designs of gold and precious stones that shimmered in the dim light. The space was filled with strange alien artifacts, each one more baffling than the last. It was a mix of opulence and alien mystique, and Alex couldn't help but stare at the room in awe. The queen was seated at the far end, her back to him. She was speaking softly to someone, an unseen figure whose voice was too muffled to hear. But Alex couldn't focus on the conversation. His eyes were drawn to her presence. Her silhouette was powerful, commanding, but there was an elegance to it, a quiet grace that made his heart beat faster. As the door closed behind him, the queen turned to face him. She was even more striking up close, her deep violet eyes locking onto his with a calculating gaze. Her face, partially covered by a silver veil, was both beautiful and intimidating. The queen's hair shimmered like liquid silver, cascading down her shoulders in intricate waves. There was no softness to her features. Everything about her was sharp, deliberate, and precise. She looked like a ruler, someone who could easily bend entire galaxies to her will. And now, Alex was part of her world. "You must be wondering why I bought you," the queen said, her voice soft yet unwavering. It was a calm, controlled tone, as if she spoke to all her subjects with the same measured authority. "You are not the first human I've taken, but you are different." Alex didn't know what to say. He stood frozen, his mind racing. Different. He was just another slave, a mere tool to be used and discarded when no longer needed. But there was something about her words, something in the way she looked at him, that made him feel as if he were more than just a commodity. "Come closer." The queen beckoned, her hand extending toward him, her fingers delicate but strong. "I want to see you." Reluctantly, Alex stepped forward, his heart pounding in his chest. He could feel his every move being watched, analyzed. He had no idea what was expected of him, but it was clear that whatever this alien queen wanted, it was far beyond what he had signed up for. She studied him like an artist observing her latest creation, her gaze intense, as if she were searching for something hidden beneath his surface. "I see strength in you," the queen continued, "and that's why I chose you." "Strength," Alex repeated, his voice rough. "You bought me to be a slave. What strength do I have?" The queen didn't flinch. Instead, she smiled, a smile that didn't reach her eyes, but was still somehow captivating. "You may be a slave now, but your strength is not in your body, it is in your mind. You will serve me well, Alex, I know this." Her words hung in the air like a riddle. "Serve her well? How?" And why? But before he could voice his confusion, the queen stood up, her movements graceful and fluid. She walked toward a table covered with ancient scrolls and alien devices, her long, flowing robes brushing against the ground. "I did not bring you here to be a mere servant, Alex," she said, her back still turned to him. "I have bigger plans for you, plans that involve more than just your physical strength." Alex was silent, his mind spinning. What did she mean by this? Why was he here? It seemed impossible to make sense of anything in this alien world. But he knew one thing: if he wanted to survive, he had to play along, at least for now. The queen turned back to face him, her expression unreadable. "You will stay here, in my chambers, until I am ready to begin the next phase. For now, you are my personal assistant. Learn the ways of my people, study their language, their customs. Understand the power you hold in your hands." Alex swallowed hard, trying to process everything she said. The power I hold in my hands? He couldn't even begin to fathom what that meant. He was a prisoner, a pawn in a game that he didn't understand. But something about the queen's presence kept him rooted to the spot, a feeling of inevitability hanging in the air. There was no escaping her, no running from the reality of his situation, and perhaps, just perhaps, if he played his cards right, he might find a way to gain some control over his fate. With one last look at the queen, Alex nodded, his voice barely a whisper. "I'll do as you ask." The queen's eyes gleamed. "Good, that's the first step." As she turned away, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. What had seemed like an ordinary auction was now turning into something much more dangerous, much more intricate. And whatever plans the queen had for him, Alex knew one thing for certain: his life was no longer his own. It was in the hands of the alien queen, and he was going to have to play her game if he wanted to survive. The days began to blur together. Time on the queen's ship moved differently. The endless corridors, the hum of the ship's engines, the eerie silence in the air, it all felt like a dream, or perhaps a nightmare. Alex woke each morning with a sense of dread, but also an unfamiliar curiosity. The queen had kept her word. She had provided him with a private room, though it was far from comfortable. He slept on a thin, metallic cot, and the walls around him pulsed with a strange, quiet energy that never seemed to stop. It was as if the ship itself was alive, watching, waiting. The queen kept her distance at first. She spoke to him only when necessary, giving him tasks to complete simple things. At least on the surface, he was to learn the alien language, study the vast library of texts, and understand the ways of her people. But there was something else in the air, something unspoken. The tension between them, thick as a fog, had yet to lift. There were moments when Alex caught her watching him from a distance, her violet eyes gleaming with something unreadable. He couldn't figure her out, and that unsettled him more than anything. On the fourth day, she summoned him again. This time, he wasn't brought to her chambers, but to a grand hall that seemed out of place on a ship. It looked more like a palace, all columns, the soft glow of light reflected on smooth silver floors, and tapestries hanging from the walls, depicting scenes Alex couldn't understand. At the center of the room was a massive table made of a material that seemed to shift in the light. The queen stood at its head, her regal figure illuminated by the soft, glowing orb overhead. "Come in, Alex," she called, her voice calm, as always. "We have much to discuss." He approached cautiously, the same feeling of nervousness settling in his stomach. She was different today. There was something softer in her demeanor, something almost inviting. "Sit," she commanded, motioning to a chair across from her. He obeyed, settling into the chair, trying to keep his expression neutral. The queen's eyes never left him as she walked slowly round the table, her movements deliberate and measured. There was a grace to her, but it was also terrifying. She moved like a predator, circling her prey, but somehow Alex didn't feel like prey. He felt like something more, something that was about to be caught in a web he didn't understand. "I've been watching you," the queen began, her voice low. "I see the way you study our language, the way you learn. You are resourceful, intelligent, and you're beginning to understand the power I hold. But there is something you haven't figured out yet." She stopped pacing and faced him directly, her gaze piercing. You think this is about domination, don't you? About enslaving you for my own purposes. But that's not the truth, Alex. Alex blinked, surprised. He had always believed that this was a matter of control, that the Queen had taken him for some reason he couldn't fathom, perhaps to use him as a pawn in a much larger game. He had never considered that there might be a different motive, one that wasn't rooted in tyranny. Then what is it about? Alex asked, unable to hide the curiosity that was now slowly creeping into his voice. His mind raced, trying to connect the dots. The Queen's lips curled into a faint smile. It's about survival, not just for me, but for my entire race. She moved to the table and placed her hands on its surface, leaning forward slightly. We are dying. Alex, my people are on the brink of extinction. Our strength, our ability to defend ourselves, is dwindling. Our technology is advanced, but it can only go so far. We need something else, something new. Alex's heart skipped a beat. He had heard rumors about the decline of her species, but hearing it from the Queen herself made it all too real. He stared at her, trying to process what she was saying. What do you need from me? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. She looked at him intently, her eyes narrowing as if she was measuring every word before she spoke. I need your humanity. Alex frowned. What do you mean? Humanity, the essence of it, she said softly. The strength that lies within human resilience, your capacity to adapt, to survive against all odds. My people have lost that. We have become too complacent, too dependent on technology. We need to learn how to fight, to thrive without relying on machines and artificial enhancements. And you, Alex, you are the key. Alex felt a cold shiver run down his spine. You want me to teach you to be human? The Queen nodded slowly, her expression unreadable. In a way, yes. I want you to show me what it means to live, not just exist. I want you to teach me how to fight for survival, to awaken the fire that my people have lost. Only then can we regain our strength, our power, and our place in the galaxy. Alex sat back in his chair, his mind racing. This wasn't what he had expected. He had thought he would be a mere servant, an object to be used, but now he was being asked to guide the Queen and her people in something far more complex. It was almost too much to comprehend. You're asking me to help you survive, he repeated, still unsure of the gravity of her words. Yes, the Queen said, her voice steady, and in return, I will ensure that you are more than just a slave. You will become something greater than you ever imagined. You will have power, Alex. You will have the opportunity to shape the future of my people. The room fell into silence. Alex's heart pounded in his chest, the weight of her words sinking in. For the first time since he had been captured, he felt something stir within him, not just fear, but a spark of hope. This was not what he had signed up for, but it might be his only chance to change his fate. He looked up at the Queen, her expression still unreadable, and he realized something. She wasn't just trying to control him, she was offering him something, an opportunity. And for better or worse, Alex was about to take it. I'll do it, he said, his voice steady. The Queen's smile was slight but meaningful. Good. This is only the beginning, Alex. Together, we will rewrite the fate of both our people. And with that, the weight of his decision settled in. There was no turning back now. The days that followed felt like a strange dream. Alex spent hours with the Queen, learning the alien language, studying their culture, their history, and their art. But every time he thought he was starting to understand, the Queen would throw him a curveball, guiding him deeper into the complexities of her people's existence. It wasn't just about survival anymore, it was about something bigger, something far more dangerous. The Queen didn't just want to survive, she wanted to revive her people, to rebuild the strength that had once made them feared across the stars. Alex was now her only hope. Every conversation, every lesson was designed to test him, push him to his limits. But despite the intense pressure, there was something else happening. There were moments, fleeting, almost imperceptible moments, where Alex saw a side of the Queen that confused him. It wasn't just the cold, calculating ruler who issued commands and looked at him as a tool to fulfill her goals. No, there were times when her eyes softened ever so slightly, or when her tone would change just enough to make Alex question everything he thought he knew about her. In those moments, She wasn't the queen who ruled with an iron fist. She was something more human, more fragile, and Alex could not understand why or how. It made him feel both curious and uneasy at the same time. He had learned to keep his distance from her. Mentally and emotionally, there was a part of him that understood the stakes of this situation. If he allowed himself to grow too close, to care too much, it could cloud his judgment. But there were also moments when it felt impossible to shut off the connection that seemed to be forming between them. One evening, after another exhausting day of training and studying, Alex was summoned to the Queen's private chambers. He had been expecting another lesson on military strategy, or perhaps an exercise to sharpen his mind. But when he entered the room, the atmosphere was different. It was quieter, more intimate, and the Queen stood by a large window, staring out into the black expanse of space. For a brief moment, she didn't turn to acknowledge him. The silence between them grew, and Alex found himself caught between confusion and curiosity. Why had she called for him? Was it another task, another lesson, or was it something more? "Alex," the Queen said softly, her voice carrying a tone he hadn't heard before. It wasn't commanding, it wasn't calculating, it was almost vulnerable. She turned toward him, and for the first time, Alex saw a faint sadness in her eyes, a flicker of something buried deep inside her, hidden behind the mask of power she had always worn. "What is it?" he asked, his voice gentle, unsure of how to navigate this unexpected shift in their relationship. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she took a step closer to him, her movements fluid and graceful. As always, the Queen, the untouchable ruler, seemed almost lost. Her eyes searched his, as if looking for something, and Alex couldn't help but feel the weight of her gaze. "I need your help, Alex," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "More than you know." Alex's heart skipped a beat. He had been so focused on surviving, on learning what he could to eventually escape, that he hadn't fully considered the deeper implications of what the Queen was asking of him. This wasn't just about teaching her people how to fight. This was about something much more personal. "I'm already helping you," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. But something in her tone unsettled him. She nodded slowly, but there was a sadness in the way her shoulders slumped, a vulnerability that she had never shown before. "I know, but there's something else, something I've been hiding from you, something I've been hiding from myself." Alex's brow furrowed in confusion. "What do you mean?" The Queen's eyes drifted away from him, staring out at the endless void of space. "I was not always like this, Alex. I wasn't always a ruler, a queen with the weight of an empire on my shoulders. I had hope. I had dreams. I believed in something more than just control. But somewhere along the way, I lost it. I became this, a shadow of who I used to be." Alex listened intently, the words hitting him harder than he expected. The Queen wasn't just a ruler, she was someone who had once had dreams, just like anyone else, and somewhere in the depths of her power, she had lost them, consumed by the very things she now commanded. "I don't understand," Alex said quietly, his voice full of uncertainty. "What do you want from me?" She turned her gaze back to him, and for the first time since he had met her, her eyes seemed to soften. "I want you to remind me, Alex. I want you to help me remember what it means to feel alive, to believe in something, not just for the future of my people, but for myself." Alex felt a surge of emotion, something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in a long time. He had been so focused on survival, so determined to stay strong, that he hadn't allowed himself to see the Queen as anything more than a ruler. But now, in the quiet of her chambers, he saw her for what she truly was, a woman who had once had hope, a woman who had lost everything and was now desperately searching for a way to regain what was gone. "I can't promise that I can give you all the answers," Alex said, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside him. "But I'll try. I'll help you find what you're looking for. Together, maybe we can make something more out of this." The Queen studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then, to Alex's surprise, she nodded. Her lips curled into a small, almost imperceptible smile. It wasn't a smile of triumph or power, but one of something more human, something she had buried deep within herself. "Thank you, Alex," she said, her voice softening. The weight of those words lingered in the air between them, and for the first time since he had come aboard her ship, Alex felt as if they were no longer just master and servant. There was something deeper at play here, something neither of them fully understood yet. But in that moment, they were to people, connected by something that transcended their roles, their species, and the very galaxy that separated them. The following days felt like a delicate dance, an unspoken understanding between Alex and the Queen. The lessons continued, but there was a new undercurrent to everything. Their conversations were less about tactics and survival, and more about life, about the things they had lost and the things they still hoped for. It wasn't something Alex had anticipated. He had come to this ship expecting nothing but pain and isolation, but slowly, the Queen was proving to be more than just a ruler. She was a soul, one burdened by the weight of her empire, but still capable of the emotions that made her human if only a little. One evening, as the twin moons of a distant planet glowed softly outside the Queen's quarters, she called Alex to her again. This time, there was no task waiting for him, no lesson about strategy or leadership. It felt different, as if the very air between them had changed. Alex, the Queen's voice was calm, but there was a trace of something else, something fragile in the way she spoke his name. He stepped into the room, the soft light reflecting off the walls. The Queen was sitting by a table, her hands folded in front of her, her gaze distant. She was no longer the commanding figure she had been when he first arrived. Now, she seemed small, almost vulnerable. The walls of her power were down, just for a moment, and Alex couldn't help but wonder what lay beneath them. "You've done well," she began, her voice low, almost hesitant. "You've taught me more than I expected." Alex stood silently, unsure of what to say. He had been helping her, guiding her, but the reality of the situation was still overwhelming. He had never imagined that he would end up in this position, that he would be the one to help an alien queen find her lost humanity. "Why did you choose me?" he asked before he could stop himself. The question had been on his mind for days. Why him, out of all the humans she could have chosen? Why had she picked him, a simple soldier who had only known war and loss? She didn't answer immediately. Instead, her eyes narrowed as she seemed to search for the right words. The silence stretched between them, both of them caught in a moment of truth that neither had expected. Finally, she spoke, her voice almost a whisper. "I chose you because you still have hope," she said softly. "Even in the darkest of places, you still believe in something. That's something I lost a long time ago." Alex blinked, surprised. "Hope? What do you mean?" She met his gaze now, her eyes holding a depth he hadn't seen before. "When my people fell, when my empire started crumbling, I gave up on hope. I became the ruler I thought I needed to be. Cold, detached, ruthless. But I wasn't always like that. I once had dreams, Alex. I once believed in something bigger than just survival." She paused, as if gathering her thoughts, and Alex could see the pain in her eyes, the vulnerability that she had always hidden behind the iron mask of her power. "I lost that," she continued. "I lost the belief that things could get better, that we could rebuild. But then, I met you. I saw something in you, the way you fight, the way you hold on to your humanity. You remind me of what I used to be." Alex felt his chest tighten. The words she spoke felt like a confession, a secret she had never shared with anyone. It was a side of the Queen that he had never seen before, one that was raw and real. He couldn't deny that something had changed between them, something deep and unspoken. "I'm not sure I understand," Alex said slowly. "You want me to teach you how to hope again, how to live again?" The Queen nodded, her expression serious. "Yes, I want you to teach me what it means to fight for something, to believe that there's more to life than just power and control. I've built an empire, but I've forgotten why it matters, and now I need you to help me remember." The words hung in the air between them, heavy and filled with meaning. Alex couldn't quite grasp the full weight of what she was asking of him, but somehow, it felt like the most important thing he had ever been a part of. She had called on him to guide her, not just as a ruler, but as a person. It wasn't just a lesson about survival anymore. It was about something far more profound. He stepped closer to her, his voice soft. "I don't know if I can teach you everything you're asking for, I'm not even sure I fully understand what it means to hope anymore, but I'll try. I'll help you find what you've lost. Together, maybe we can rebuild not just your empire, but your belief in the future." For the first time, the Queen's lips curved into a small, genuine smile. It wasn't the smile of a ruler. It was the smile of someone who had found a small glimmer of hope. Her eyes softened as she looked at him, as if she were seeing him for the first time not as a slave or a tool, but as someone who could change the course of her life. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I didn't expect this. I didn't expect to find this in you." Alex felt a sense of warmth spreading through him, though it was quickly replaced by the weight of responsibility. He had promised to help her, to teach her, but the journey ahead wasn't going to be easy. They were both broken in their own ways, both trying to find something that had been lost long ago. But for the first time, Alex felt a sense of purpose. This wasn't just about survival. It was about redemption for both of them. "Let's begin then," Alex said, his voice steady. "One step at a time." The Queen nodded, her expression filled with determination. Yes, one step at a time. And so, in that moment, something changed between them. They were no longer master and slave. They were two souls trying to find their way in a universe that had forgotten what it meant to hope. Together, they would rebuild, piece by piece, not just the empire, but the very essence of what it meant to be alive. And maybe, just maybe, they could rediscover the dreams they had both lost along the way. The days turned into weeks, and the lessons continued. Each one felt heavier than the last, as if the weight of their shared responsibility was growing too much to bear. The Queen had changed since that conversation. She wasn't just a ruler anymore, cold and distant. Now, when they spoke, her words were filled with a quiet urgency. She listened more carefully to him, as if every word he spoke could help her find the key to unlocking the hope she had lost so many years ago. The Queen no longer seemed like an untouchable figure now. She was someone trying to remember what it meant to feel. Alex, too, had changed. He had come to this ship expecting to serve, to be nothing more than a tool in the Queen's grand scheme. But as the days passed, he found himself drawn deeper into the complex world of her people, into their struggles, their pains, and their hopes for survival. He could no longer deny the bond that was forming between them. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about something more, something that neither of them fully understood yet. One afternoon, the Queen summoned him to the grand chamber where they had first spoken about their mission. The room was as imposing as ever, the cold walls reflecting the dim light of distant stars. But there was an air of anticipation that had not been there before. Alex knew that this wasn't going to be just another lesson. Something had changed. The Queen stood by the large window, her hands resting on the glass as she stared out into the abyss of space. When Alex stepped into the room, she turned to face him. There was something different in her expression today, something that had been absent in the past. She looked vulnerable, but there was also a fierce determination in her eyes. "Alex," she said, her voice steady, but there was an undercurrent of something deeper. "We've reached a point where the future of my people depends on more than just words. It depends on action." Alex nodded, unsure of where this was going. "What do you mean?" The Queen took a slow breath, as if gathering her thoughts. "You've taught me a great deal about survival, about fighting for what matters. But I'm realizing now that it's not enough. We need to do more than just fight. We need to inspire. We need to make my people believe that there's more to life than just enduring." Alex's heart raced. He had been helping the Queen, guiding her, but he hadn't thought about the larger picture. He had been so focused on their personal connection, on helping her find her humanity, that he hadn't stopped to consider the true scale of her mission. This wasn't just about saving the Queen. This was about saving an entire species from extinction. "Then how do we inspire them?" Alex asked, his voice filled with curiosity. "How do we make them believe again?" The Queen turned away from him, her eyes fixing on the distant stars. "We show them that change is possible. We show them that, even in the darkest moments, hope can survive. And we lead by example. If they see us, if they see you and me, working together, showing them what it means to fight for a future they will follow." Alex felt a surge of emotion, a mix of fear and hope. The Queen was asking him to do something he wasn't sure he was capable of. She was asking him to lead, not just in battle, but in spirit. He wasn't a leader. He was just a soldier, a survivor. But the way she looked at him now, with that unwavering belief, made him wonder if maybe he could be more. "I'm not sure I know how to lead them," Alex admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've never been a leader. I've always just fought. I've never had to inspire anyone." The Queen looked at him, her eyes searching his face as if trying to read his very soul. "You've already led me, Alex, in ways you don't even realize. You've shown me what it means to care again, to fight for something beyond myself. That is leadership. You've already proven that you have what it takes. Now, we need to take the next step." Alex felt a weight settle in his chest. The Queen was right. She had already trusted him in ways no one else had. She had opened up to him, shared her vulnerabilities, and now she was asking him to step up, to become the very thing he feared. He wasn't sure if he could live up to her expectations, but as he looked into her eyes, something inside him stirred. He could do this for her, for the people she loved, for the future they both hoped for. "Okay," Alex said, his voice firm now, though his heart still pounded in his chest. "I'll do it. I'll help you lead them." The Queen's lips curled into a small smile, a smile that held more warmth than anything she had shown before. "I knew you would." She took a step closer to him, her presence overwhelming. "Together, we can change the fate of my people. Together, we can show them that hope is not just something we dream about, but something we can make real." For the first time, Alex felt like he truly understood her. She wasn't just a queen trying to survive. She was someone who had once had dreams, who had once believed in something better, and now, she was trying to find her way back to that belief. She wasn't asking for his help to conquer the stars. She was asking for his help to rebuild what had been lost. "I'll follow you," Alex said, his voice steady, filled with a newfound conviction. "Whatever it takes, I'll follow you." The Queen nodded, her gaze softening. "Then let's begin." And just like that, they were no longer just two people bound by circumstance. They were partners, united in a mission that was bigger than either of them. The Queen's empire was on the brink of collapse, but together they would fight to save it, and in doing so, they would discover a strength they had never known they possessed. It wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about living. And for the first time in a long while, Alex believed that maybe, just maybe, they could succeed. The galaxy had always been a vast, indifferent expanse, cold and unfeeling, stretching endlessly in all directions. But now, as Alex stood beside the Queen, he felt something shift. The weight of their mission was heavy, yet there was a strange sense of clarity in the air, a quiet understanding that they were no longer just fighting for survival, but for something greater. They had come a long way from the day he was sold into slavery, dragged through the corridors of this alien ship. The Queen, the untouchable ruler, had become his partner in this strange, shared journey, a journey neither of them had expected to take, but one that was now their only hope. The Queen had gathered her council, a group of trusted advisors and military leaders who had once been loyal to her, though many had grown disillusioned over the years. The room was filled with a quiet tension as Alex entered, standing beside the Queen. The council members turned their eyes toward him with suspicion. It was clear they didn't trust him, a human, a former slave, now standing in their midst. But the Queen's presence was enough to silence any protests, and she stood at the head of the room, her posture regal and commanding. "This is the man who will lead us into the future." The Queen began, her voice strong and unwavering, yet there was a subtle vulnerability behind her words. "Alex has proven to me that hope is not something we simply dream of. It is something we create, something we fight for, and it is time for us to fight." Alex glanced around the room at the faces of the council members. They were all beings of power, each holding influence over different aspects of the Queen's fractured empire. The tension was palpable, and for a moment, Alex wondered if he was truly ready for this moment. Could he really lead them? Could he inspire them to follow the path the Queen had laid out? A path that would take them to the heart of their empire's rebirth? Could he convince them to believe in something other than their own survival? A murmur rippled through the room, a mix of disbelief and curiosity. The Queen was giving him a chance, but would the council, would they listen to a human? to a former slave who was now standing in their midst as if he were one of their own. "What does he know of leadership?" One of the council members, a tall, blue-skinned alien, sneered. "He is a slave, nothing more than that. How can we trust someone like him to lead us?" The queen turned her gaze to the council member, her eyes narrowing, and for a moment, Alex thought she might strike him down. But then her expression softened, and she addressed the room with calm authority. "Do not mistake what you see before you," she said, her voice carrying the weight of years of experience. "Alex is not here by chance. He has earned his place, and he has earned my trust. His strength lies not in his past, but in his future, the future of all of us." Alex's heart raced as he stood there, absorbing the weight of the queen's words. She had given him everything: her trust, her faith, her belief that he was the key to their survival. He couldn't afford to fail her. He couldn't afford to fail them all. The room fell silent. The council members exchanged wary glances. But there was no more outright dissent. The queen had spoken, and when she spoke, her authority was absolute. Still, Alex could feel the unease in the air. They were not ready to embrace him, not yet. They still saw him as an outsider, an anomaly in their ranks, and yet, Alex knew this was the moment where everything would change. This was the turning point, the first step toward the revolution the queen had spoken of. He could feel the weight of history pressing down on him, urging him to act, to step forward and show them that he was more than just a symbol of change. He was the leader they needed. Taking a deep breath, Alex stepped forward, meeting the eyes of each council member. One by one, he didn't have their trust, not yet, but he had something else, something more powerful. He had a vision, and he would make them see it. "You've lost faith," he began, his voice steady but filled with conviction. "You've lost hope, because you've seen nothing but failure. But I've seen something different. I've seen a way we can turn this around, how we can rebuild not just our strength, but our belief in something greater. We've been fighting for survival for too long. But survival is not enough. It's time to fight for something that matters, for something that lasts." He paused, letting the words sink in. The room was still, the tension hanging thick in the air. For a moment, Alex wasn't sure if they were hearing him, if his words were having any effect. But then, slowly, the murmurs began, quiet at first, then louder, as the council members exchanged words among themselves. Alex turned to the queen, who stood silently at his side. Her eyes filled with something he couldn't quite place. It was as if she, too, was waiting for something, waiting for the moment when their fate would be decided. The room's energy had shifted, and Alex could feel it. The council members were beginning to listen. One by one, they began to speak. "If we're to survive, we must change. We must rebuild," said a council member, a woman with silver hair and emerald green eyes. "The future of our people lies not just in our strength, but in our unity," another said, his voice gruff but filled with newfound determination. Alex could feel the tide turning. The queen had believed in him, and now, so were they. Slowly, they were coming around, realizing that they could not continue down the same path. The galaxy was vast, and their enemies were many, but they had one thing that no one else had: their will to change, their ability to rise from the ashes of their past mistakes. And in that moment, Alex knew he wasn't just a slave. He wasn't just a soldier. He was a leader, no longer standing in the shadows, but stepping into the light. Together, with the queen by his side, they would rebuild not just her empire, but the hope that had been lost for so long. The future was theirs to shape, and for the first time, Alex felt a sense of certainty deep within him. They could do this, together.